some of the crossover between the different voices from each stories that maybe you can talk about, where you see similarities between each other and linkages to each other's stories.
Well, I see the obvious ones. The Holocaust, the slave trade. He has a piece here called Seven Beauties. I have a piece of the Met called Five Beauties. It's about the women in my family.
And Michael and I talked at the opening. The first thing I noticed was the rope and the story about my family going across the rope on a river, and also about labor, because, oh, and we had a long talk at the opening about what Jews were allowed to do.
Oh, I love that.
Okay?
Yeah, yeah.
So, not everybody, I always thought everybody knew this, but Jews were only allowed to have certain occupations, and that's where a lot of stereotypes came in about money. They were only allowed to be bankers for centuries in Europe.
Tailors.
And, right, we were talking about tailors. My grandfather was a furrier. He learned, when on his way from Poland to France, he worked unloading boats, and he learned to be a furrier. They were banned from doing lots of jobs, and then because of that, they were prejudiced against because that's what they did. So that's where, like, the Benjamins thing came from.
And they were money lenders because
Money
that
lenders,
was
right.
an available occupation. They became good at it.
Yeah.
At least they were good occupations. They weren't ditch diggers or cotton pickers.
I'm wondering if any of you can speak about the relationship between your works in regards to work, labor, and branding, and how capitalism or marketing has impacted the suffering of all of us. And if you have any thoughts about the terminology these days of branding yourself and marketing yourself, which we in the visual arts world are really succumbing to that. So I'm hoping one of you will be able to talk about that.
Well, I succumbed to that many years ago because I grew up, they found me drawing cartoons from the Sunday paper when I was 3 years old. That was 1958. So from 58, my whole life, I was always the artist in the family. They supported me as a creative person, but they never thought that I'd ever make a living at it. So I had to do a lot of mental acrobatics to get myself to believe that I could, because I was always taught that I couldn't. And that required you to brand yourself. You know, I didn't see branding as a bad thing; I just saw it as a business move. And I remember we had the National Conference of Artists, and we had a meeting at my loft in Newark this Sunday that John Michel Basquiat was on the cover of New York Times Magazine. And that became like, okay, Mom, see, here's one black dude doing it. I can do it too. And that was it. You know. I had been struggling for like maybe 6 years up to that point. But that proved positive, converted my family to think it was possible. And to this day, they're still amazed that I can make a living, you know, with old shoes or burned cloth. So I think that you can be an artist on lots of different levels. I have a friend in Georgia who makes little Rubenesque women out of clay and casts them in bronze. They're only this big. He doesn't have a gallery, doesn't have a dealer. He doesn't do exhibitions, but he goes to every community art show in America, gets in the station wagon and drives them around. And he makes a really good living. You know? But my personality wanted me to reach for the same career as the most successful artist I was aware of. And I'm still on that journey, but it's very challenging. But I feel happy with my life. If I don't make it to Damien Hirst level or to Jeff Koons level, you know, I'm glad I have the freedom to just be able to create things, and I'm glad I got people like you you all to respond and ask questions. It makes me feel like my life has a little bit more meaning. So, the question had like 4 parts there.
Well, because I was aware when, in this piece behind you, Willie, the scorching and the branding reminded me of the enslaved Africans who were branded and the
Right. Well,
the people in the concentration camps were marked and branded, and we all have references that we pull on when we see or hear things, and for me, because I'm an African-American Russian Jew, all of that floods into me. So when I look at your work and I see your work and I look, it's like an uncontrollable, series of images that run. So I was wondering if any of you were seeing connections between your works in those regards.
Definitely. I don't want to dominate, but I just want to say, I don't make stuff deliberately. I open myself up to the flow of creative energy. And I'll do it in front of a table filled with 500 pairs of high heel shoes or a bunch of photographs of a hairdryer, but I never know what I'm going to do. And I never know what it means when I'm doing it. When I was an illustrator, everything had to be exact and meaningful. The picture had to tell the story, but I haven't done that in decades. But the pieces began to talk to me at a certain point and tell me what's going on. And that's what the iron was. Of course, in the 60s in high school, we didn't really learn a lot about slave trade. Studying African art in college was more about African civilization than it was about slave trade. But somewhere along the line, I did hear about the branding. And I heard it from one of my pieces. So it became a big part of my.
So you would say the impulse to brand was first before the overlay
Before the knowledge, yes.
of the knowledge.
The branding came to me because at the Student Museum in Harlem, back in those years, the artists shared one room that was probably like from here to that wall. Now they each have big studios. So they didn't want me to scorch in the building, set up smoke alarms. But so I was making figurative sculptures out of steam lines that looked like African art objects. So because of my interest and what I was reading at the time, I said, okay, so if this is a spiritual object, what is the evidence of its power? And it was the scorch. The evidence of the steam mine power is the scorch. So the first series I did in '88 for the museum there was called Presence and Evidence, where there was a big 8x8 tapestry covered with scorches, and then the iron that made those scorches was reconstructed into a figurative piece standing on a wooden iron board made from Harlem wood found in the street right in front of it. So I'm lost now in what I'm saying, but I think I probably said enough.
This question is for Michael. Would you say that the seed for your work, like the kernel for an idea, comes from your personal story, and then you build out from there into cultural, other parts of the story, or do you think it comes the other way?
It's the other way.
It says cultural first, and then
social.
and then you build a personal story into it.
Yeah, social, political.
Yeah.
It enrages me when I see people getting injustices to people, to workers is what I notice, but to anybody, I get pissed off, and that just stays with me a lot of the time. And most of the time I don't know what to do with it, but occasionally I do know what to do with it, and I get real involved, like the sugarcane workers. Esperanza was in the residency in the Dominican Republic, and I'd never seen sugarcane. And guys, Haitian workers were hand cutting.
Los batees. And the sugar cane, they're called batees. They're plantations.
No, that's where they live. They live in the batees. But I grew up in this agricultural setting with machines, and to see men out hand with machetes, that just freaked me out. I really got very upset about that. And for years, I was learning all about the slave trade to the Caribbean and why we have cheap available sugar. And those guys are still there. Those Haitian workers are still in La Romana and Bahia, cutting by hand, living on these bateys that Esperanza's talking about. They're little ghettos outside of the towns. It's a really lousy situation. So that consumed me for a while.
I have a question about the influence of women. You know, where would all of you have said something about women in your lives, like your work and stuff like that? And Willie, and this is to all of you, but I want to start with Willie first. I remember when we were very young, and I would come over to your house when your mother would be there, and I just felt that she was 500% for her son, encouraging her. So, and I listened to you talk about this work that you have in the women. I'm listening to you also talk about the women. And Esperanza, as she's there asking you questions about work, you know, the women. You know, I feel that women know they're the force, but they still haven't received the equality.
Mm-hmm.
But they're the supportive, nurturing element of, you know, and I'm sorry to talk too much, but I gotta bring this to it. I remember when I used to teach, I had this boy named Jorge in my advanced drawing class, and they had to do thesis work. So I let them each come in with 3 ideas of what they thought they wanted to do. So this boy, he could draw like Michelangelo without even trying. That's how good he was. Whether he was looking at the model or whether he was just drawing, I mean, just a master. So of course I'm saying, I said, this boy needs to be teaching me rather than me teaching him. You know? But anyway, so he brings in his 3 ideas to show me, and he shows me this drawing that and a lot of the boys, they come from that cartoon comic book of Superman stuff drawing, you know, but he knew that anatomy back and could use the mark and stuff like that. So he shows me this drawing of these drawings of what he thinks he wants to do. And so I said, well, what's your first choice? So he shows me this drawing. He said, I want to show women as being powerful.
Yeah.
And that men have all the power. Why don't we show women as being powerful? So he shows me these sketches he has, and here he has this woman, and you can tell like the Superwoman in the comic books, you know, but here she's wrapping nothing on and the big boobs and the machine gun in her hand. So I said to myself, if I tell him, Jorge, do you really want to do this? You know, I know he's going to say to me, well, you professors, you just want everybody to do what you want them to do. So I said to him, I said, Jorge, I said, why don't we go to the females in the class and ask them what they think of you? He said, oh, that's all right, Professor Jones. I said, we got it. But I finally convinced him to let them critique his work. And the thing that they said, well, first of all, you have women looking like an object, a sex object. The second thing is women have children, and we see ourselves as Mother Earth, and we don't see ourselves as putting guns in our children's hands to kill people, you know. So I always go back to the story because I think women, and here I'm really stepping over the line, I think they're smarter than men. But because they don't have the real equal power, that makes one be clever in how to navigate the world.
I agree.
You know, so that brings me to this thing of asking you all about, you know, talk about the women, because I think of your mother when we were young, you know, and she didn't have to say anything, but I knew she was wholeheartedly with you.
Only one baby boy.
Yeah. So I just want to ask you all
Women influencing your families or support systems?
Just love.
Just
Yeah.
Well, I grew up with all women. I jokingly say I come from 5 generations of divorced women. My great-great-grandmother, who died in 1968, was 112 years old. She had been married 5 times.
Wow.
I don't know how many were broom jumps and how many were with a marriage license. And And then her son, my great-grandfather, he was married 5 times. I knew all of his wives because it was all in my lifetime. He had his 5th marriage when he was 80 years old because he was a preacher. And a woman is sitting in the front pew.
Charismatic.
Yes, Red. Go ahead, Red. He ended up marrying her. And there were no males born in my family. Just in 5 generations, 2 males were born. So that made me grow like a little prince. You know? My cousin Jimmy in LA had the same experience. But Jimmy's been married 4 times already.
That's right.
I've only got 2 so far. And they were both common law. But women are, I believe it, women are powerful. Just think of the act of creation. Who brings life into the world? Women biologically have more connective tissue to the right and left hemisphere than men do. So when I did this show, my resident show, Cities in Harlem, I was with an artist named Renee Green. And her work was much more masculine looking than mine. So everybody thought that Willie Cole was the female, and Renee Green was the male. I consciously chose to explore my mother's family, the women, with this work. I would switch once when I did my dad's. My dads were all scoundrels, gamblers, jailbirds. I've done a few things about them too, but mostly it's been female influence.
Yeah, I think it's easier to look at female influences because you can point to domestic things or loving things, and the men, like you say, the scoundrel quality is a little harder to identify. It takes more thought.
Well, sometimes it's obvious, like if, I'm not gonna give you my dad's story, but my dad's the king of the blues. He's not only a son of a gun, he's a snake in the grass and a SOB.
That's my
But I have some pieces that were about him and his life as well, though. Mostly installation pieces.
I feel like Willie's already answered this, and maybe even Michael, but I was wondering, as a photographer, did you start? I don't know your history as a photographer. You picked up a camera and you took pictures of things you loved, and then eventually it became this story?
Well, I went to Vietnam. Well, I went to Asia. We went to Vietnam. My husband was teaching in West New York. He was teaching in West New York for 39 years, and he taught about the American involvement in Vietnam. Right? Like probably the first public school teacher to do that in the country. And they gave him a sabbatical for a month. And my father, my survivor father, married a Vietnamese woman that he married in Canada, who she was actually here in school with her first husband when Saigon fell. But they got married, and she's 12 years younger than my dad. And my dad was very young when he got married, so she's a year older than Frank, which is weird. That's beside the point, I know. Interesting. Yeah, it's weird. Anyway, so she's, when my dad died, now she's like up here. It's wonderful. So they took us to Asia, to Vietnam, and Memorial High School gave him a sabbatical in April. And so he gave me a Canon PowerPoint with, that was in the beginning with the first, LED screens. And I only took I had a Canon 81, but I didn't really use it. And I never could connect with sending like the film off and what I took when I took it. I just never got that. But I took Polaroids for my paintings. I took a lot of Polaroids. I liked that. I understood that. So I followed him around with this camera, and I was like, wow, this is fabulous. Because you could see what you did right away, and it made sense to me. So that's how I got my start. And then I did a residency at SVA. And this one, and Franz Garrido, I submitted work traditionally put me in a show. I was doing dolls then, which I'm gonna go back to one day. Dollhouse size doll, miniatures.
And when did it become your story, your history?
Well, first I was doing playing grown-up, which was dolls on fairy tale backgrounds. They're on, you can see them on my website. And then I started, I think when the Holocaust stuff started happening, maybe around 2011, I started using my family photographs as backgrounds instead of the dolls. Kind of dark. And while I was doing that, then this idea started brewing. I really want to take the dolls out though.
Yeah, you should.
I had them all, I had an intern, and she made them all, it's impossible to find, so she had made them all anatomically correct. Because they're fully bendable, you know, they're fully articulated. They're not much smaller than Barbies. Totally off the top. Yeah. So I have a great doll closet.
I got Barbies, lots of Barbies.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
mine are little, they're small. Barbies are cool though.
Yeah, I had 2 daughters, I did a lot of Barbies.
Yeah. I have all like miniatures and blenders. Really cool.
So can I ask, Michael, like you said, you had mentioned like that unknown history of Mexico, like that there were Africans in Mexico, and that you were sort of angry about like that was sort of an industry and wondering how it would relate to your family. So
Yeah.
since then, what are you doing in your work like now? Because you mentioned this is 2 years ago. Is it like a personal? Have you explored the personal thing, or are you more focused on the sort of?
For some reason, it doesn't interest me that much, the personal part.
Okay.
I don't know why I haven't gone to the ancestry site. I'm not motivated to know the specifics. Maybe someday I will.
It's kind of fun to do that.
My cousin, who lives in Utah and used the,
Oh, yeah.
what do they call it, genealogy?
Mormon. Yeah.
She has the information. I think that's also at the back of my mind. I can just call my cousin up and get the scoop.
But you would do it yourself. Your DNA is your DNA. It'd be a little
You can do
different,
your DNA.
your cousins,
Right.
if you want to do it.
They share DNA with his cousin, first cousin?
We're supposed to, yeah.
Start there, but then your own.
I have cousins in Mexico City, from the same town. I come from a little town called Bachnia in Poland. Well, I was Klipstein, all Klipsteins. There's some Gentiles and there's mostly Jewish, but I found a bunch of Gentiles. And they all come from Bachnia.
From Bosnia.
Bachnia,
Where?
Poland, which is outside Krakow.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So, but they were all over, like, they're, Jorge Abraham. I'm gonna go, I think he's a photographer too, in Mexico City.
Wow.
Well, to continue that a little bit and to tag onto a question you brought up earlier, I think for me, this kind of meeting is just really thrilling, and my practice doing research into things that I'm attracted to is also thrilling. It's just what art has become for me. You know, it's research based, and I research the things that I'm attracted to, and I try to tell the story or put it into my work the best way I know how to do it, and also stay excited. You know, to stay interested, and I am. But I feel really lucky to have that because I'm interested in projects and process and materials.
So it gives you everything.
It gives me a lot.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I love research.
So that's kind of following up this thing about process and like the artist job, the artist role, and for me, it's not always a commercial success. I wish it was, but it isn't always. But I'm interested in my work, you know, and my ideas. And I love this kind of exchange. It's really pretty thrilling.
Thank you so much, everybody.
Just very quickly, you mentioned Damien Hirst and Jeff Koons. I probably wouldn't have come to hear them today. I came to hear you three. It's been an honor, and that's really